What is going on, everybody out there? Welcome back to another live episode of the Unfounded Podcast with me, your host, Christopher Turner. I'm happy to be back here, guys. Sorry for the delay. I think it's been exactly a week, actually, since my last episode, and I've been busy at it. I've been out hitting the streets, driving DoorDash a lot, trying to make that money, get myself ready for this end of the month rent, or beginning of the month rent, however you want to look at it, right? Oh boy, have I been stressed out lately. Exceedingly stressed out. So many different aspects of my life, areas of my life, are just not well put together and aren't working out the way I'd like them to, or at least in the time frame I'd like them to, if that makes sense. So that what I've been going through recently is something like a affirmation of the methods, the philosophies that I've been talking about with all of you in these episodes. To kind of go and reapply those again. That the episode I talked about a couple weeks back, about losing my job and the situation that's surrounding that. I've been going through somewhat of a grieving process around that. Which may sound a little trivial at first. Because it's like, it's just a job. But it was something deeper than that. It was a friendship, It was a deep friendship, one that that had spanned time. A person that I had seen kind of grow up or grown up with. And that the mourning comes from some kind of loss there. Not of the job itself, if that makes sense. That there have been many times throughout my life where I've unfortunately experienced this, but heartbreak's something we don't like to deal with. When somebody lets you down, when somebody hurts you, intentionally or not, it doesn't matter, the effect's the same. As I've said many times before, our initial reaction is usually to run away from it. It's so terrifying. Let me actually show you on the screen here. Let's see. Sorry about that, guys. Hi. I guess I just really wanted to jump right into it. Thanks for joining me. Sorry about that, guys. I'm a little disjointed this today. Thanks for all your support up until this point. But I'm going to keep on rolling with what I was talking about. We run away from that kind of disappointment. We don't like to even believe that it exists. The reason I say I've experienced something like I've experienced this disappointment repeatedly is, in some ways, it was how I was christened in a way. Does that make sense? It's the way I was baptized in this world. It was through kind of experiencing something like the proclivity of the human being. Something like the proclivity of the human being to respond to fear over positive emotion. And dealing with the ramifications of responses and a fear-based response. To be more specific, it's like people do things that hurt you deeply. A lot of times they do it unintentionally. Sometimes they do it intentionally. We like to tell ourselves nobody would do something to hurt us intentionally. But the unfortunate reality is that oftentimes people do. That the world can be a very malicious place, that people can be very malicious. And that one of the things that can rock you the most as an individual is to experience that firsthand with somebody that you care about. It's a certain type of heartbreak. That heartbreak, like I said, combined with kind of the economic loss, the position that my friend put me in when he fired me, it caused me to go internally, to hibernate in a way. Because as I said, I've been through this before, and I've responded improperly before. I think this is applicable to many people's lives. You can find certain instances in your life, usually one of the more painful ones, where you had control over how that situation went. You usually can recognize this in retrospect. But allowing yourself to, but not gaining control of your emotions, not speaking honestly, but allowing kind of the negative emotions to take hold, can cause those situations to devolve. When you have that kind of deep disappointment, there's something about, for me, it's something like it attaches to like my faith in humanity. That I've been deeply disappointed by people over and over again in my life, as I'm sure many of you have. And I don't think this is a unique characteristic of me. That I think disappointment's something commonplace. That there is something common about the ways in which human beings will respond when provoked with fear or negative emotion. And that what it produces is something like a massive amount of suffering in the people and individuals that reap the reward of that, if that makes sense. I've been fighting trying to not place myself in a victim space. Right? Because I had a role to play in that. As I went over in that episode, I'm not going to bring it up again. We always have a role to play in whatever happens in our lives. So you have to be very careful when you're looking backwards, looking at the past. You have to be very careful if you ever find yourself in a judgmental position where you're judging somebody else. This has been a hard lesson for me to learn throughout my life. The reason why, I think, is very practical. That if you don't do that, you'll end up a very bitter person. There's something to accepting the universality of experience. We have to let go of the expectation for perfection in other individuals and actually kind of expect people to act in these certain ways. That maybe that's what we need societally right now, is we need a bond. But I'm kind of getting off topic there. I want to talk about hurt in some way. Disappointment. Betrayal. I want to talk about all those emotions that make you squirm and make you run and make you hide and make you not want to look at, especially yourself, in those situations. Because like I just said, you always have some kind of role to play. There are examples of people that do things maliciously without any kind of provocation. That does exist, but it's rare. Most of the time, and the rule of thumb is, I think us as individuals should be trying to find how we've made the world a better place or our own individual world a worse place. And by doing that, we figure out where we can fix ourselves, what we have control over, and what actions we can take practically. You have to track it down. I haven't really talked about my military experience, and that's, I think, what I'm dancing around here. I haven't gone into what happened with me in the military. I haven't talked about that with you guys yet in depth because it's been something it's a hard subject for me to talk about. It's something that's deeply personal to me, and it's something that for a long time I carried as a weight. because I felt deep shame for the mistakes I had made. But it was deeper than that. Not only deep shame for the mistakes I had made, but also a disappointment in the people that I had called friends and brothers. I'll try to explain what happened in as concise a manner as I can for you guys, because it's an extremely complicated story, and it would take like 2 hours to go through, and I think I'd bore you, honestly, if I did that. But as you may know, I joined the U.S. Air Force right out of high school. Why? Well, I wanted... It sounds cheesy and corny, but I was so idealistic, so naive as a kid, as an 18-year-old, that I had planned to go up to college, that I had set up everything at Northern Arizona University to become a student there and to get my degree into something. I was supposed to go up for an orientation, but the weekend before I was supposed to go up to the orientation, I had a barbecue with my friend, my best friend, the one that lives above me right now, oddly enough. And he was joining the Army. We had been childhood friends, for years at that point. And I asked him that night, why was he joining? Because it had been something that I was attracted to as well. Obviously, like every young boy is, you're attracted to the heroicism in war movies, right? So there was a certain aspect of like kind of the Hollywood aspect of the military that attracted me, but it was deeper than that. I asked him why he wanted to go, and as he went through, I don't remember specifically what he said, but as he was going through his reasons, I realized that those were all similar to mine. That I was feeling similar to him in what I wanted to do. That some of what he was talking about was purpose, direction, meaning, right? Things that, in some weird kind of intuitive way, I knew that college was going to be a waste in that. That it shouldn't be, but that it would be. Does that make sense? So I joined the Air Force. I went to Texas, I trained, I became a security forces member, which is like a MP in the Air Force, right? I performed the security function for bases, but also the police function for the base. So I was a cop in the military. I trained at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio. I stayed there for about a year, did my technical school training there too, and then got stationed in Guam, of all places. I remember sitting there waiting for my orders when you're brand new and you're just waiting to figure out where you're going to go. It's like the most exciting time. There's some excitement in the military that's hard to describe, especially when around PCSing, because when you get orders, because you're waiting to figure out where you're going to live the next 2 years or 3 years. And you don't get to choose, you get told, which in a weird way, it sounds kind of unfair or not unfair, it's not the right way to put it, but tyrannical in a way, but it's and unenjoyable, but it's not. It's actually very enjoyable because it makes you see. There's a certain aspect of it feeling meant to be when you get your orders. Oh, this is where I was supposed to go. Okay. That I got Guam and I didn't expect it and I didn't even know where it was. I heard Guam and I thought Vietnam. You know what I mean? And I told my mom and she flipped out. Anyway, I found out after doing some research that it's essentially one of the most beautiful little tropical islands you could imagine. It's paradise. And so I was very excited. Shipped off pretty quickly, got to Guam, got set up with my squadron and kind of got settled in, started working. You start going through programs to kind of learn about how to be a cop, how to be a police, security forces member, and then a patrolman, kind of a desk sergeant, go up through these ranks, and they start applying myself in that. You get assigned to a flight, we call them, like a platoon in the Army, and that flight that you get assigned to is like your family. You gotta imagine, I'm literally on the other side of the globe on an island that is 40 miles long and 9 miles wide at its widest, with people that I have never met before. Absolutely nobody. And so when you get assigned to a flight, you don't just work with these people. You live with them. You do everything with them. And they become your family. At least for the time frame that you're in that area. And one of the beautiful things about the military is that this process happens over and over again, especially as you PCS and go different places. So you grow really deep connections and a broad network of them very quickly. Very positive aspect of it. But that the flight that I got on was something of a party flight. It was a very laid-back atmosphere in Guam. It was something like work hard, play hard. Work hard, play harder. And the flight that I got on or was assigned to embodied this, and I very quickly became really good friends with a large group of people. It was like 15, 20 people. We would do everything together. We'd drink, we'd go out to the bars, we'd go to the beaches, we'd do everything when on our off time. But very quickly when I got there, I got exposed to, which I don't know if any of you guys are going to be familiar with this, but it's because it's not really around anymore, but it was called Spice, or K2. And I started to see this pop up at parties. And then at some of the parties I started to do it. And the reason being, my thinking was, at that time it was a legal substance. You could go to the head shop and buy it. And in the military it wasn't illegal in that sense. But what had happened is, like I said, the system of the military works a little different than the civilian world. And so you essentially, if a commanding officer gives you an order that is lawful, that is deemed lawful by a court, you have to follow it. So one of the things that happened when this spice first became a problem for the military was they kind of banned it. Each base general would go and issue, a general order saying, hey, any military member caught using spice will be subject to punishment, Article 15, these kind of things, right? So that was the route that it was starting to take, but it hadn't really formed yet, right? And so I got involved in this party lifestyle. Like I said, we worked hard, but we played hard. The longer this went on, the worse it got, and the more I started to get involved in the spice. I had not been exposed to drugs, really, oddly enough, before this. I had smoked weed once in high school, but I'd never been exposed to a substance or had a desire to go towards something repetitively. I'd never dabbled in vice. Light drinking, maybe, right? But there was something about, and maybe some of you can attest to this if you ever experienced this or you used this back when it was around, that spice is something different. It can be a very, very, very potent drug. Something like a mixture, what I've described it as something like a mixing of a highly intense psychedelic with weed. That it can be as mild as feeling giggly and tingly, or as strong as going somewhere else, like another dimension. Right? And I still have had a hard time to figuring out why I got involved in this, because I was so straight-laced, such a kind of straight-edge individual. Being successful at everything I was doing in the military, extremely successful. But I also got involved in this lifestyle on the side. Started to use spice regularly. Me and this group. And you have to think, these are cops. So this was within the squadron that was supposed to be enforcing the general order, right? This went on and it went on and it went on. You go to parties and you see other cops there, you see other people there, and they'd be using it, they'd smoke with you. You know what I mean? There's a weird way in which once you do something that's risky once, other people see you do it and they join in. The longer you do that, the more you feel like it's something that's normal. It's the normalization process. And that's kind of what happened. And it became normal. Unfortunately, it wasn't becoming normal for the military, right? While this was happening, I was, excelling. I was getting awards. I was going up through the ranks. I was acing my tests, right? I got Airman of the Quarter. I got Airman of the Year. I believe I got Base Airman of the Quarter, if I'm not mistaken, as well. Yes, I did. I got a Senior Airman below the zone, which is getting rank as early as you possibly can by going up against a board and competing with other people. I'd literally gotten every award I could have gone up for. On top of that, I had been nominated to be something that was called a Desk Sergeant, which was the dispatcher of the police force on the base. I started to train in that at a rank that was 2 ranks lower than what the position usually required. Going to show, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn, I'm trying to set up exactly how well set up I was in this position, how much good I had done, right? How much hard work it took to get where I was. And that I was at the precipice of a long-term career in the United States military, and I was 19. That I had people vouching for me, my base general vouching for me, my commander vouching for me to go to the Air Force Academy. I was in the process of looking and finding, a U.S. senator. I was to sponsor me. Anyway, the whole purpose and point of this is to show that I was on the way up, but there was a naivete I had. I was young. I had this energy. I wanted to experience the freedom of the civilian world, except I was within the military world. Eventually what happened is we got caught. The situation surrounding how we got caught is overly complicated and not really necessary to go into, I don't think, at this point. I can at some point, but... An investigation was launched. Throughout that investigation, I was relieved of duty. They took my badge. I was placed in what we call supply, which is essentially kind of the peon of the squadron, right? Take out the trash, scrub the, pressure wash the sidewalk, the building, you know what I mean? Clean out the connexes, paint. You do all the shit that nobody else has time to do, kind of a thing. And while the investigation was going into the spice use, that's what I did. Is I went around the squadron and I cleaned other people's shit. I took out their trash. I did the most basic kind of jobs. Very odd thing I noticed when this happened, as soon as this investigation got launched. That, like I said, there had been a lot of people in that squadron that I had done this with. As soon as I was placed in that position, I'd say at least a good 95% of the people that I knew that had done that, or had been in the exact same environments many times and had been participating in the exact same thing. The way that I saw those people treat me was eye-opening. To see people go from treating you like a golden boy to treating you like the scum of the earth in the matter of hours. To go from the top to the bottom. I was being investigated by people that I worked with, people that were my friends, by my bosses, right? People that were my family. I couldn't talk to other people. I couldn't go out in public without the OSI, which is the Office of Special Investigations, which is who was investigating me. If I saw them with their families, they'd literally take their families and leave. They viewed me as a threat. Eventually what happened is I got charged with 4 different counts. One was a trafficking account, essentially introducing spice onto a base, an installation. One was drugging somebody, which it didn't happen, or it didn't happen in the way they said it happened. One was using it myself, and one was possession. Combined, all of those combined together, I was facing a court-martial and a maximum sentence of up to 10 years in federal prison. Military prison. Leavenworth kind of shit. And I was a cop. Your life can fall apart so quickly that you can't even put it into words. It's a similar type of shock to when somebody dies abruptly, or anything you love. It's a sense of, what the fuck just happened? It's an odd perspective shift in which the whole world looks mushy, doesn't feel real. Change hasn't set in yet, and so you're in this area of disbelief. And then you go through all of the steps of mourning. What ended up happening is I waited and I waited and I waited. It wasn't only me that got caught up in this. It was my entire flight, essentially. It was like 15 other guys and me. We all got relieved of duty, so initially when we were doing this, we were all doing it together, and there was this big group of us. In the military, I shared a room with somebody else. I had a suite, and then they had a bathroom, or I shared a bathroom, and then there was another suite. So my suite mate was my best friend. And we're sitting there, and as the months are going by, people start getting called to the commander's office, and they come back and they'd be like, hey, I got Article 15, or I got this, or I got that, and now I'm going to this base, or I'm leaving. And time goes by, and time goes by. Months and months and months. People keep on leaving. All of a sudden, we're sitting there 7 months later, and it's just me and him. Just sitting there looking at each other like... And at this point, we didn't even know we were being charged yet. The whole part that I told you about being charged, that came like 7 months after the investigation was launched. So I waited 7 months to figure out what was going to happen in my life, to find out that I was possibly going to have it ended. Me and my buddy realized at that point that we were going to go down for this. Something as trivial as using a drug like that, spice. I had a lawyer. My parents sacrificed a lot. A lot of money, time, effort, their own emotional energy, support. They got me a very good lawyer, and that lawyer worked with me. And it got all the way up to my court-martial date. It was not my court-martial date. It was like 4 days before. My mom was going to be flying out there to support me in it. I'm going to be going to a general court-martial. There's different degrees of court-martial and the severity. The worst one you can be is a capital tribunal that can actually, deal out capital punishment. I wasn't in that, so but I was in the general one. 3 days before I was supposed to be court-martialed, before I was supposed to find out what was going to happen with the rest of my life, I got a call from my lawyer, and he said, Chris, you need to make a decision. He said, they've offered you something called a Chapter 4 discharge. Let me back up real quick before we go into that. My buddy, as we realized this, we both realized that we were going to get screwed for this, that whatever had gone on in this process, as people had gone back, as people had made statements, all of this, that for some reason we had been fingered as if we were the ones that were the cause of all this. What I ended up simplifying it down to is the fact that me and him were kind of the hangout areas. So that's where people would go and hang out. That's where they would gather. That's where we would meet up before we went out. That's where we would watch movies. That's where we would chill. A lot of times that's where this would take place, right? So it does make sense that it made it seem like we were the ones that were hosting this, but it wasn't really the case, right? Anyway, that's the picture that was painted. Came to the day, like I said, a week before, and my buddy, Riendu, gets called in, and they gave him immunity. And how that works in the military is similar to kind of how a general order works. It's like if the commander grants you immunity, you have it. It's not like you have a choice to have immunity in the military. If you're granted immunity, you have it. What does that mean? Well, that means now anything you say after I say you have granted immunity, I can prosecute you for if I can prove that you're lying. It now becomes a legal matter. Anything you say becomes perjury if it can be proved as being illegal or a lie. So this is what they would do to compel speech from people. And this is what they had been doing, as I found out later, to people throughout this time, is they call them back, grant them immunity, have them say something. As long as they couldn't prove that it was illegal or untruthful, they would go on with kind of a slap on the wrist. But that after the fact, I found after reading all of the statements that what had happened was exactly what my friend and me had been thinking, was that we had been fingered for this. We'd been used as a scapegoat. A place in which everybody else that had been involved in that and their responsibility could be relinquished, could be placed upon. They granted him immunity, and he went in and told the truth. Which was that, yeah, we had used this stuff. We did it quite often. We would go out and party. Sometimes it would happen at the dorm. But that we weren't trying to traffic it. We weren't trying to drug people. There was nothing like that going on. This whole idea that we were trying to create a drug ring in which we were profiting and selling, this huge, complicated mess that had become, that were utter lies, he told them as that. On top of that, he also said that most of the time, he was the one that was in the room, not me. Now, it was kind of debatable on whether that's completely true. We were both there most of the time. He did me a solid by telling the truth. Because after that, they called me with that Chapter 4 offer. And I had to decide whether I wanted to get out of the military with something called a general under other than honorable conditions discharge, or whether I wanted to go and face the court-martial. Risk having 10 years of my life taken away. But to prove that it was something unjust. My initial reaction, and what I told him initially, was that I want to fight it. I'm not above taking my whippings, but I'm not going to take everybody else's too. What he told me was that I needed to strongly reconsider that. That from his legal opinion, that I was not going to fare well if I went into a court-martial, that they had a fairly decent case against me, at least in use, and that would mean that I would have a charge on my record, which would be a lot more detrimental than the discharge classification. And so it was at that time that I decided I was going to leave the military. Along with that Chapter 4 comes a relinquishing of all of your the general under other than honorable conditions, a relinquishing of everything you've earned, all of the benefits, the veterans benefits. By the time I left the military, I had been in, I think, 3 years and 4 months. My term was 4 years long. So I did over 75% of my enlistment. I had paid into the GI Bill, and I lost all of that. So not only did I lose my career and my upshot, but I lost my ability to go to school and pay for it myself. Not only that, the money that my parents had used to pay for my legal expenses was the money that they had saved for me to go to college. So 3.5 years after starting that journey with the military, I was back at home, living with my parents, with nothing to show for it. All of the rank, the respect you get from the rank, the medals you've earned, kind of the rewards, the awards you've earned, the respect you get from your peers for the achievements that you've made, that goes away like that. And I didn't know how to respond. I had no clue what to do. I ran from it, obviously. I told myself while I was in this position, while I was in this extremely stressful situation for nearly a year, that all I needed to do was get out of it and that everything would be fine again. The most disheartening and scary thing was once I got out of the situation, the way I was feeling didn't go away. That if you're in a position like that, where you're treated like the scum of the earth for 9 months to a year, long enough, you will actually internalize that and believe it. You'll actually believe that about yourself. And then you'll go out into the world and act it out. And as we've talked about how the ego forms, and people will reflect back to you what they're seeing, what you're putting out. And downward you spiral, grabbing vice along the way. You know what I mean? Leaning on people that don't have your back. Looking for love in all the wrong places. Placing too much emphasis or pressure on people to commit, to solve your problems. These were all things that I did after that. But I also decided that I was going to go to college. That the only thing I could do was to start something. Did I want to do that? Absolutely not. As I said earlier, like I had this feeling that college was going to be not a waste. That college was in some ways snake oil, a modern snake oil of sorts. I didn't want to get caught in that. But that at the same time, what I needed when I was at the bottom again was just anywhere to start. And college was a good fit for that. And so I did. I applied for loans. I got federal funding to do it, and I went and took out loans and went to college. And I started at University of Phoenix, and then I transferred to ASU, and I went and I spent 4 years earning my degree there. And initially, secondary education. I was going to be a teacher. And then I decided that education wasn't the right method. It wasn't the right venue for me to kind of express myself. That I was developing in this time. Sort of spiritual awakening was taking place, but very, very slowly drawn out process. That, like I said, I don't want to say that university was all waste, because it did serve its base function in opening up my own individuality. It was the start of me developing my own identity, of forming a new person. One that was stronger than the one that had just gone out into the world and utterly fucked it up. I decided to switch my major to history and political science because that's where my passion lies. Philosophy. That I felt this pull while I was in school to do something that was practical. But something told me internally that practicality isn't everything. I don't want to be practical. I want to love what I do. And so I chose what I love. There's been many times where I've looked back on those choices and had some form of regret. Maybe I should have been more practical. Maybe if I went out and got an engineering degree or something like that, I wouldn't be sitting here with no job, driving my car for money and delivering food. Most likely. But I'd also have a whole swath of problems that I can't foresee from this perspective. Ones that are pretty common in the world right now, and ones that I hear people talk about all the time. Problems that I'm fortunate to not have to deal with anymore. I know this has been kind of just a rant about me and my past. I want to kind of try to pull some meaning out of it. Going back to the military, like I said, once I left, all of the investigation ended. All of the investigation materials all the discovery gets turned over to you. And you get to go through and look at what people said, what statements they made. The people you called friends and brothers. To see how many people had stabbed me in the back. Thrown me under the bus without a second thought, and then proceeded to be my friend for months and months and months after. I got to witness exactly how two-faced people can be, how willing they are, and unfortunately, how little they care when they do it. A person wrapped in their ego does not care what effect they have, other than the one that affects the ego's image of itself. It created a deep distrust in people with me. That ever since I've been fighting internally this honestly certain type of hatred for the way in which people treat other people. That as my story goes on, that got to experience again and again. That kind of betrayal, and kind of dishonesty. But that, from what I can tell, folks, the reason that I kept experiencing that, because I didn't deal with it when it happened. I didn't go after the military. I didn't sit there and let myself feel the pain that I was feeling because it was overwhelming. I was broken utterly as a human being. I had no confidence, no love for myself. Not only no love for myself, I had a hatred for myself. Not only did I have a hatred for myself, I had a hatred for all of the people I called brothers. Not only did I have a hatred for them, I had I don't know what the right way to put it is. Anger towards my family members because of the way in which they made me feel inadequate just simply by being there. How much I could see, how much it hurts when you see how much you've let somebody down. The reason that I kept on experiencing this kind of pain was because I didn't deal with that then. I didn't speak it into being. I pushed it down. I numbed it with drugs. I immediately started smoking weed when I got out of the military. I started drinking. I got a job at a bar. I started bouncing. I was a bouncer in a bar back. I would stay up until 2, 3, 4 at night. I bought a motorcycle, my only form of transportation. I drive drunk home at night on my motorcycle nearly every night of the week. I mean, I cannot tell you how stupid I was, how suicidal I was in the way I acted, how much lack of love I had for the person that I was. Not anymore. And here's the odd thing, guys, is I'm back in a position like that. Not one in which I'm dealing with backstabbing and stuff like that. Maybe I guess a little bit with my friend, right? As I started the podcast. I guess I am. But the reason why I feel positive, the reason why I have energy right now, the reason why I'm scared, but that fear is not stopping me anymore, is because I see the problem now. Does that make sense? That in an odd way, you really are your own worst enemy. That the hurt you experience, your inability to kind of deal with that hurt, your inability to see how that affects the way you interact with other people, objectively, creates inside an individual a downward spiral in which the only salvation is self-expression. And maybe is why it exists, period. Why do we have this idea of it's always darkest before the dawn? People have to hit rock bottom. Why do we have this idea? Why does it seem like a truth carried forward through the ages? That's how the individual is turned on. That's what turns them on. Your fire. You have to be tested repeatedly. And you have to fail repeatedly because nobody's perfect. The practical effect of your failure is something like emotional suffering. Every time you fail at whatever this task is, this hurdle that's been placed in front of you, for me, it's being vulnerable. You may say that sounds funny because you're doing a podcast here where you're talking about your whole life. Oh yeah, it is funny because I do this with in this format, but if you tried to do this with me at an individual level, it's going to take a while, usually. I have to know who you are. The old Chris wouldn't have let somebody in like this. The old Chris had never told anybody about his sexuality prior to the episode that you guys listened to like 10 episodes back. The old Chris didn't face his dragons, he ran from them. He allowed them to eat other people. That's not me anymore. I was tested in a way when I was with my friend. He was too, I believe. You're always tested and the answer is always truth. Whenever you're tested, the answer is truth. Your truth. Whatever it is, as scary as it might be. In that situation, what was my truth? Hey, I have feelings for your girl. What can I do about it? Tell you about it. It's the only thing you can do. I can't turn off the emotion. I'm not in control of that emotion in that way. That kind of attraction doesn't work that way. It feels something subconscious. But what I do have control over is who knows how I'm feeling. In order for me to enunciate my truth, I had to be vulnerable with him and her. Not only in an emotional sense, with my livelihood. And that, I guess what I started out this podcast, I was talking about a little bit of the struggles I've been having. The reason it's been such a mourning process is because I did that. The effect afterwards, not the way I wanted it to play out. Even though I feel like I did everything correctly, the result is something like more suffering. But there's a weird way in which I know it's right. I know I spoke my truth. I know I kept myself honest. I know I kept myself on the straight and narrow. And so what that tells me is that, you're supposed to go this way. The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. That is a quote by Eleanor Roosevelt. I wasn't planning on bringing up a quote like that, but it was just right in front of me when I looked down at this page. The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. In order to believe in your dreams, in order to make something a reality, in order to make a new version of you, in order to tear down your ego and allow your individuality to shine through, you have to be vulnerable. You have to get comfortable with the idea of vulnerability being a necessity. Because belief is something like speaking. Speaking it. If you believe something, if you have a dream and you believe in the dream, you need to speak it into reality. It makes it solid then. It's like the smallest little seed of something. The world has to know it's something that can or should exist in a real format. If you sit there and kind of constantly keep your dreams shut off or compartmentalized from the real world, you never talk about them, you never open up with anybody about them, you never speak about them, period, those seeds die. You cease to even realize that you have any. The deeper you go into that loss of a dream world, that a dream state, or people sink into depression. The ways in which we've kind of locked people into this rat race mentality, the ways in which we've taken people and tricked them into getting into debt like we have with college, right? Which locks them into getting a higher paying job so they can actually support themselves. And bombarding them with all of this marketing material, buy, this, house, car, whatever the iPhone, whatever the fuck it is, right? bombard. Until they do that and they get enough of that shit that they're so rolled up with bills, an accumulation of things, and so dependent on the small serotonin release you get when you buy something that now that's all they do. And now maybe they're in a job that they got because of the money, but they don't like the money. Most people are. They don't like the job, they like the money. And so when they go to the job, they realizing, if you think about it, even if you work a 9 to 5, you spend 75% of your day, 75% of your life you spend at work. Yet most people are willing to trade away the enjoyment of 75% of their life for these other things, at least initially. And the people that aren't are tricked into it. They're lured into it through things like college. Hey, come here. We'll loan you this. Yeah, hell yeah. You do whatever you want. Go get an arts degree. Good luck finding a job afterwards. You still owe me money. Go get a job. Fall online. See how it has this way of keeping, in a weird way, people's individuality from springing forth. That process is a dream killer. Once you go through most of the main steps that this modern world has set up for us, all of the grades in school, all the different professional steps that you can make it towards, all of us will get to the same point, this point of, what was that for? It's never satisfying. It always demands more and more and more. Never fulfilling. Maybe satisfying, not fulfilling. I don't know if those are kind of synonyms, so I guess you get what I'm saying. So that people give up on their dreams. They cease to believe that dreaming is a method of thought that's necessary. That visualizing what you want, believing that it can actually be a reality, having faith, and speaking that belief into being by expressing it to other individuals in this world is the process through which you make it happen. Along with all the other steps that you have to take practically, right? But that the first step is the speaking it into being. The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. Oddly enough, this whole, I went through all this part of my past there with the military, right? This whole time, as I went through college and was working different jobs, different roles, going through different phases in my life, working with Amazon, getting this job out here, moving out here, all this other stuff. What I've been looking for is my dream. What I want out of life. I've been searching in these different places. Is it here? Is it here? Is it here? The problem is my hurt that I've carried forward from these experiences I had in the military early in life has kept me from being vulnerable in a way that would allow it to happen. I haven't spoken to being who I really am until now. I haven't set the intention that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life until now. And I feel so energized that when I wake up in the morning, I get to set up my day. I'm finally at a place where I have control over my day. Am I making a lot of money? No. But am I going to make it? You're damn right I'm going to make it. And I'm happier now than I've been in a really long time. And man, is that showing me something. Be vulnerable with the people you love. Open up to them. Show them how much you love them. Show them how much you love yourself by telling them what you dream of. By showing the world how big your dreams are. And with that, guys, that's going to be the Unfounded Podcast signing off. I hope this wasn't too long or drawn out for you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I kind of forgot that I was recording or doing it on a video here. Oh, we got some viewers here. Thanks, guys. Thank you for tuning in live. But I will be back on here very soon. I'm going to try to do this every other day, and I'm also going to try to figure out a schedule once I get my rent caught up at the end of the month here, to where I can actually schedule it live for you guys so you know when to tune in. But it's all a process, right? And I'm figuring out slowly. So again, thank you very much for your support, your listenership, and stay safe out there. Be vulnerable. Lots of love. Bye-bye.